Sometimes the best stories in golf aren't found on tour. You'll find them at the back of the range. And here's your host, Ben Adelberg.
And welcome to the Back of the Range. I am your host, Ben Adelberg. This is episode 205. The first week of my month-long road trip following the best amateurs in the world started at the U.S. Junior Amateur last week at Country Club of North Carolina. Incredible golf course and hospitality. I can't thank everyone at the USGA and CCNC enough for a fantastic week. The players, parents, coaches, and other media members all made it memorable. Congrats to Nick Dunlap and Cohen Trolio for making it to the finals. Dunlap ultimately captured the championship, but they both showcased the state of junior golf brilliantly, and I'm looking forward to the 2022 U.S. Junior, which will be held at Bandon Dunes. Are you kidding me? Sign me up for that right now. That is really where everything started for me with the Back of the Range as far as covering amateur golf on site with a camera, and I'm definitely looking forward to going back there again next year. The road trip continues. As quickly as I got to North Carolina, that's as quickly as I just arrived in Gulf, Illinois for the 119th Western Amateur Championship to be contested at Glenview Club. We're going to cover quite a bit in this episode, but let me just state this. This is quite possibly the strongest field for an amateur championship that I've ever seen. This is a grueling week. Starting with 72 holes of stroke play, the field of 156 is cut to 44 after 36 holes. Those 44 must then play 36 holes in a single day to fight their way into the Sweet 16 for the match play portion. And once it goes to match play, anything can and usually will happen. Last year, it was Pearson Coody that won the Western Am at Crooked Stick. In fact, one of the more memorable episodes here at the Back of the Range was when I interviewed Pearson the day after he won while he was in the car driving home from Indiana to Texas. Remember, every single episode is available for download at thebackoftherange.com, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Pearson was featured on episode 151, so go back and listen to that one if you haven't already. This episode, however, is all about previewing this year's edition of the Western Am. These preview episodes are a fun and informative way to set the table, so to speak, really get an understanding of the history of the championship and what we might expect in the upcoming days of championship play. My special guests on this episode are Rick and Charlie Waddell. Rick is the tournament chairman of the Western Am this year. Not only is he a member of Glenview, but so is his son Charlie. In fact, Charlie is in the field this week, joining other strong mid-ams such as Stuart Hagestad and Garrett Rank after winning the club championship at Glenview. It's a special week for the Waddell family and a special week for Glenview. You see, Glenview is where the very first Western Amateur Championship was contested back in 1899, and it returns for the first time since 1905. I spent yesterday getting a feel for the course and becoming more familiar with the lay of the land, and this club absolutely drips with history and legacy. During this episode, we spoke a bit about the history of the Western Amateur, the Western Golf Association, the Evans Scholarship Program, which is the chief beneficiary of this championship, and also how you'll be able to watch the Western Am online via their new streaming platform. Before we get started with this episode, just a quick thank you to Patrick Donahue, Steve Pirletti, and John Bordeman, and all the great people at the Western Golf Association. As you may remember, this collaboration between the WGA and the Back of the Range was announced several months ago, and finally this week is upon us, and I'm excited to join the team and bring everyone more content than ever from Glenview Club. As always, follow along on social media, on all of the Back of the Range channels, but most notably Instagram, but also make sure you're following WGA Championships on Instagram as well. All right, let's get started with this special episode. Rick, Charlie, you're at the Back of the Range. How are you?
Ben, I'm Rick Waddell here. Great being with you. Look forward to a good show.
Thanks so much, Ben. Looking forward to it. And thanks for all your participation with the Western Amateur.
Well, gentlemen, it's going to be a fantastic week. I know that I'm very excited to be here for the 119th Western Amateur Championship at Glenview. Before we talk about the field, the championship, and Glenview Club, it's a bit of a rite of passage here at the back of the range. Everyone needs to give a little bit of a history of how they got involved with the game of golf. So, Rick, I'm going to ask you to jump in first, followed by Charlie. Talk a little bit about your involvement in the game, how you got started, and also how you passed it on to your sons.
I got into the game of golf because I married a woman who grew up playing junior golf, and we met in college, and I picked up the game. I was actually a tennis player early on, and played competitive tennis, up through sort of freshman year of college, and then in sort of that junior senior years, I got hooked by it, by the game, and my wife and I were married the year after we graduated, and she said, "Where do you want to go on your honeymoon?" And she said, "Let's go down to Hilton Head and play golf."
Oh, wow.
And we played a lot of golf together, and then we had our two boys, Frederick and then Charlie, and they came along into the game, and they played a lot of sports. They played, baseball, hockey, and golf right through college, but they really were by high school focused on college, and then that led to both of them having very good college careers. So I always say that my wife, their golfing team come from my wife, but I've just been there to be supportive and play, and I've always wanted to be competitive with my boys. So it's caused me, because they're both very good players, to want to always be kind of relevant to our boys' golf game. So it's been a lot of fun as a family along the way. It's been a great journey, and we're so proud to see Charlie now competing at the highest levels on the amateur circuit here in the United States.
Charlie, talk to me a little bit about maybe obviously climbing the ranks in the junior set and playing collegiately at Bucknell. How is, a lot of these kids that are going to be playing in the Western Am you're going to be competing against, you're going to see that they are either already at school or making that transition from junior golf to playing collegiately. What was your transition like, playing with your dad, playing with your brother, and then moving on and playing collegiately?
It was a great question. And, growing up, it was, sort of the three of us. And then if mom wanted to join us, we would, golf was certainly the sort of center point of a lot of our own social interactions, as a family, incredibly special and still that way to this day. And then, in high school, like my dad said, we played everything. So we played, golf in the fall, hockey in the winter, and baseball in the spring. And it wasn't really until sort of probably sophomore, junior year that really started to hone in on golf. The same story with my brother, who's 2 years older. And coming out of high school, I wasn't a particularly great junior golfer. I didn't leave the state of Illinois that much. Academics were always a very important part of the way that mom and dad raised us, and was really just looking for, I wanted to play Division I golf, and really looking for sort of where the Venn diagram intersected between Division I golf and great academics, and that led me to Bucknell.
Sure.
Sort of ironically, where actually my grandfather and great grandfather both went there. So got there, and there was a new coach who was in his second year. I came in with 5 other recruits, and we had 4 years where we kind of had a great little mid-major program there in Lewisburg, and won our conference twice and made it to the NCAA regionals twice, which was really fun. And I just kind of continued to get better every year. I worked really, really hard on my game and just continued to improve throughout college.
Yeah, I'm really trying to maintain my professional acumen here as as somewhat of a professional golf podcaster. But when you start talking about NCAA tournaments and Bucknell and me being a former Kansas Jayhawk, I start kind of twitching a little bit back to 2005. And
well, Ben, you brought it up. I didn't.
No, I know. I did. I know I did. I do it all the time, but
we were actually in 2005. That was my sophomore year, and we were down as a team. We were down at Innisbrook. We had just gotten our behinds kicked by the Copperhead course in a qualifying round in sort of the middle of March. And this was before smartphones.
Oh, sure.
Everything. So we kind of run off and run back to the little condo we had. And this was before the NCAA tournament, every game was on TV, and it was whatever region you were in. And I forget, but Florida had a game, so we were watching the crawl for the first half. And then it wasn't until, sort of probably 10, 12 minutes left in the second half that CBS flipped over to the Bison versus the Jayhawks, and it was unbelievable. It was a kind of a formative moment and a fun sort of crossover between golf and good college basketball.
Well, I'm so glad that's such a fond memory for you. Anything we can
absolutely.
Anything we can do to make our guests happy here at the back of the range. But no, it's definitely sticks out in my memory as well. Now, you mentioned your brother Frederick, and I couldn't help but notice that he is. Talk to me about what he is doing. Either one of you, Rick or Charlie, talk to me about this job that he has in the game of golf. This is probably the first guest I've come across, or first person I've come across. Is he a product manager for Titleist? Does he make golf balls for a living?
He does. Titleist makes 1.3 million golf balls every day, and it's quite an amazing stat. And I've actually been out to the ball plant 3 outside of Fairhaven, Massachusetts, and it is an incredible sight to see their production line, from the raw materials going into the finished golf balls being x-rayed, as they have since Titleist was formed in the 1930s, to make sure that every ball is perfectly round. And it's a very, very interesting process. And Fredericks has been in charge of some part, or now all. He's just been promoted to oversee all golf balls at Titleist. So he's got all the Pro V1, top of the line, AVX, and then the other brands. And he's always he got to Titleist in 2012 after graduating from Kellogg with a degree in marketing and finance, and he put his resume out on LinkedIn, and Titleist saw it, had him out for an interview, and he played very high end amateur golf, both as a collegiate and then the 04 U.S. Amateur at Wingfoot. He competed there, so a very, very good, accomplished player. And they wanted somebody in the ball division who could appreciate at the amateur level,
sure,
just how important the golf ball is. Kind of funny story. He had multiple interviews during his first round, and of course everybody said, "What's the most important piece of equipment in your bag?" And Frederick would say, his putter, or, sometimes my driver.
Right.
And they kept looking at him and saying, "Don't you think the golf ball? You're interviewing for golf ball." And so he's come around that the most important piece of equipment is the golf ball. But he's enjoyed it. Titleist is a great company, and it's been fun to see him develop in and around the game of golf with a great company like Titleist.
Ben, real quick on that too, with bringing it to the Western Am, the way I describe it to people is, they say, "Oh, how cool is it you're playing Western Am?" And I said, "Well, your home club." And I said, "Well, it's kind of a family affair because my dad's the tournament director. I'm playing in it, and my brother's making all the golf balls that these guys are going to be playing."
There you go.
So, we got every angle covered.
Well, I mean, and the other immediate thing I'm thinking about, Rick, is you're probably not getting ties for birthday presents. I mean, there's got to be just a dozen pearls, every year for you at the very least. And then I'm also wondering if there's ever a time where you play a joke on them and all show up wearing hats of other ball or club manufacturers just to maybe try to get the blood pressure going. But
we should try it if you have time for a very quick funny story.
That's what we do here. Go ahead.
So Frederick joined in August of 2012. And he happened to be about 4 or 5 months ahead of at that time the new rollout in January and February of 2013 of the new Pro V1 X model. So he was, in that early launch. And in the spring of 2013, I was playing golf here at Glenview with some buddies of mine, and they were wanting to know how Frederick was doing. I said, "Well, they just rolled out the new Pro V1 X line," and he was there. And they said, well, what's the difference between the new Pro V1 X, and the old one? And I said, well, the new ones are free.
Yes.
I don't think I've paid for a Titleist golf ball since 2013.
I was gonna say, yeah, you could just that's gonna be wiped off the expense list with golf. I don't think you need to worry
Yeah.
about that. Well, that's a great history in the game. That's a great history of your family's involvement in golf, and I think that's leads us right into just your involvement with the Western Golf Association, and it's just such an incredible story that Rick, you're the tournament chair. Charlie, you're playing as the Glenview Club champion. Rick, I want to ask you. You're a tournament director for Northern Trust. You've been behind the scenes at some of the largest tournaments in the world. You've seen some of the best players in the world, and this is something that listeners of this podcast or people that are going to be following the Western Amateur online or obviously they're in person. There's many titles that flow around at a tournament. Rules committee chair, competition committee chair, tournament director, volunteer. There's all these titles. Maybe they just see what's happening on the golf course. Can you speak to some of the things that you do off the golf course in preparation for the Western Amateur?
Sure. Love to fill you in on the details because it's first of all a collaboration
Sure.
Between the Glenview Club and the Western Golf Association. And fortunately, then that relationship between our two organizations goes back to literally the beginning of the Western Golf Association. Glenview Club was one of the 11 clubs that came together in the late 1800s, formed the Western Golf Association, and the Glenview Club has just kind of been a big supporter financially through the Evans Scholars in hosting early on the very first Western Amateur, and this is the 119th edition. So this relationship goes back a long way. And when I was asked to be the tournament chairman now about a year and a half ago, it was an honor, to be honest with you, because of that relationship and to be associated with an organization that does so much good, and an organization, as I said, that we're so close to. And, the experience that I've had, with the Northern Trust Open and the Northern Trust FedEx Cup playoff, the model, the basic financial model is the same. And golf, one of the great things about golf is how much money goes to charity. And we were quite proud at the Northern Trust when we took that tournament over in 2008. They were putting back about $700,000 into the community in Los Angeles. When we ended that relationship in Los Angeles, about 9 years later, that tournament was giving nearly $3 million back to the community. And so we want to see that charitable component be a big part of the outcome of the tournament. Sure. And the Western Amateur is no different. We raise money, we have tournament expenses, and whatever's left over goes to the Evans Scholars Foundation. Net number has typically been in $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 range, which is the WGA is very happy. I can tell you and your listeners right now that we'll be much higher than that. We're right now targeting probably in excess of $800,000 that this Western Am is going to contribute to the Evans Scholars Foundation. So it's just like off the charts. The Glenview members have come together through a variety of fundraising initiatives to raise money, and we're investing a little bit more because another outcome, one of the things I learned about through the Northern Trust is how important the players perceive the tournament. And yes. The goal of the Western Golf Association has always been, from the very first question I said is, what do you want out of this? And besides the money, the charitable contribution, they said, we want the players to talk about the experience and what it was like to play in the Western Amateur at Glenview. And so we've invested a little bit more in terms of player hospitality, player housing, player amenities, in order to make their experience here just a little bit different than some of the other amateur tournaments that they play in. And we think the Western Amateur, being the third oldest amateur championship in the history of golf, these players deserve that kind of investment. So we're quite proud of the contribution we're going to make to the Western Golf Association, and I think the players are going to be in for a real treat here at the Glenview Club at the Western Amateur.
So I just want to make sure I heard that correctly. Typically 50, 60, 70 is the net donation to the Evans Scholar, and you're saying this week at Glenview with this 119th Western Am, you're targeting somewhere in 750 to 800,000. Did I hear that correct?
That's correct. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. I'm not a math major. I don't want to figure out what the percentage increase that is, but that's incredible. I'm really glad you spoke to the purpose of the event, obviously to benefit the Evans Scholar Foundation, but also you hit it right on the head. Get these players talking about how special this event is. I can't imagine how many amateurs are out there that are going to be watching online that are going to feel that this is a tournament that I need to get into as quickly as possible in the upcoming years.
I learned early on the PGA Tour is another interesting stat.
Yeah.
If you combine the charitable contributions of professional football, professional baseball, hockey, and basketball on an annual basis, that total doesn't equal what the PGA Tour gives to charities every year.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the game of golf, and I think the amateurs who are going to play here and who have played and have gone, many famous players who have gone through the Western Amateur, gone on to be professional golfers, they understand the charitable nature of golf, not only tournament golf, but players who have their own foundations and give back. And I think that understanding, and if we can impress some of these players that this tournament's going to create a record contribution to the Evans Scholars Foundation, I hope that really spurs them on to in their golf careers to get to that next level, whether it's collegiate or professional golf, and always remember to give back because that's what the WGA is about. That's what this club is about, the PGA Tour and the game of golf. So we're very proud to be a part of that.
Before we talk about this year's Western Am and the great field and the players and everything that you've done to build this championship at Glenview this year, can you perhaps talk a little bit for people that don't know, talk a little bit about the history of the Evans Scholar and Chick Evans and how this tournament actually came to pass?
Absolutely. Well, it's, the history between Glenview Club, the Western Golf Association, and the Evans Scholars Foundation are all tied in to, Glenview Club and Chick Evans. And as the story goes, Chick Evans was a lifelong amateur, very successful, and had done some promotional videos, kind of when people were doing that back in the 30s, and had been given a sum of money that he couldn't accept, or else he would become a professional. And
Sure.
He was out at Glenview Club and was getting to know some caddies out here, and one of whom was couldn't continue his education at Northwestern. He was a student at Northwestern, couldn't continue his education. And Chick Evans was telling his mother about this, and she said, "Well, why don't you take the money that this producer's trying to give you, and take it to the Northern Trust and start a foundation to send these caddies to college." And he said, "Holy cow, what a great idea." And that was how the whole idea of this Evans Scholars Foundation was started. And it was started, as Glenview is one of the anchor clubs, sending initially just to Northwestern, and then obviously, the foundation and the program and the association, the Western Golf Association, has done nothing but grow from there. So it's a really cool kind of element of how it's really come full circle back from 1899 to the 30s to now being back at Glenview with the Western Amateur, benefiting the Evans Scholars Foundation.
Charlie, I'm going to let you jump in here after your father gives his thoughts, but you mentioned, Rick, that the Western Am is the third oldest amateur golf tournament in the world, behind obviously the amateur and the U.S. Amateur. You're returning to Glenview for the first time since 1899. It's hosted a U.S. Am, it's hosted a U.S. Open, but that was back in 1902, 1904. And the course right now plays just under 7,000 from the tips. Obviously, it's not unusual to see elite championships held at courses that are under 7,000 yards, but obviously the occasions, they're starting to become few and far between. How do you see Glenview challenging the best amateurs in the world this week?
First of all, I'd say the membership doesn't take any particular pride in having these players shoot high scores. I mean,
Okay.
we know the strengths and weaknesses of Glenview, and our course superintendent, Brian Moore, has done a fabulous job of setting this course up. Charlie and I have just played it this morning, and he can tell you how he views the course. It's going to be firm and fast. The greens are going to be very quick. The rough is going to be up. They're going to have one of the things about Glenview is we do have the ability to put some pins in some very interesting positions given the slope and where the bunkering abuts the green. So I think the players are going to be challenged, and there are going to be a lot of birdies because they can bomb it a long way, and they're all good wedgers and putters of the golf ball. But I think once you get into match play, it's two guys going against each other, and I think they're going to find a real challenge out here, and I think they're going to really enjoy the conditioning of the course. It's going to be in superb condition.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of building off that, I think that there's certainly some, the scorecard sort of doesn't tell the whole story because there are definitely some holes that play a lot longer than they would indicate yardage wise, with some cross bunkering and some water that comes into play. But there's certainly a strategic element that is in play at Glenview in terms of, picking how far you're hitting it off the tee on a certain line. But then also, kind of playing the angles into the greens. I do think, I think someone will probably go pretty low and just catch a little bit of a heater and take it, pretty far under par. But at the same time, I think there's certainly some calamity that awaits around, different areas of the golf course. I think the par threes are going to be spectacular. We've got 4 great par threes sort of mixing in length, all to, I would say, probably the 4 hardest greens on the course, or at least 3 of the 4 hardest greens on the course. So I think you could see some interesting things done there with pin placement and tee setup. It's going to be a great test. Guys are going to love it. It's old school. There's nothing, gimmicky about it. For the greater Chicago and Illinois landscape, there's some neat elevation change, which you don't really get, in the surrounding courses. The piece of property is spectacular. The guys are going to love it. They're going to have so much fun.
Now, Charlie, you've played in several U.S. amateurs in the past. You actually qualified for this year, so congratulations. You'll be at Oakmont a couple weeks after the Western Am. Do you approach a Western Amateur? I know you've played several Western Ams as well. Do you approach a Western Am differently than a U.S. Am? I mean, they both have the stroke play portion. They both have a match play portion. Very strong fields. Probably a little different emotion at this Western than in previous. Have you given any thought to how you're approaching each tournament?
It's a great question, and let me sort of say I'm trying to approach both of them differently, I would say. And it's an interesting time because I've been really successful in qualifying for the U.S. Amateur, going back to 2014, and those 36 hole one-day qualifiers. I sort of changed my mindset a little bit and stay very, very patient. The classic cliche of one shot at a time, et cetera, but just really sort of stay in a nice sort of consistent, steady mindset. And I candidly have kind of struggled when I've gotten to the US Am or played in the Western Am where, I look around and I see all these great players and I think, holy smokes. I mean, if I'm not making a bunch of birdies or, can't make a mistake, Right. When at the end of the day, anybody that's played enough, and I hope that I have now, realizes that that's not really how it is, that, you need to play your game. You need to stay patient and steady. And so I've really, after qualifying for the U.S. Amateur and going into the Western Am, I've really been sort of reflective about why I've been successful in those U.S. Am qualifiers and trying to replicate that mindset both at the Western next week and then also at Oakmont. And I think that, my game's in a good place right now to sort of do that. And, I've played Glenview Club so many times going back to when 6, 7, 8 years old. And I think that'll be a real challenge here is to stay patient. Because I've played a lot of really great rounds here. So to just stay patient and keep a nice sort of steady, calm mindset, I think will be very beneficial.
Yeah, and you're bringing a hell of a resume into this. Obviously what you did at Bucknell when you're in college, and you winner of the Lupton Invitational, and anytime we can drop Joe Duraney's name in an episode, I always like to do that because you beat him in a playoff. So that's just to make people listen and hear his name so I can get him on this podcast in the future. But I also don't want to point, we got to point out the fact. I mean, you're one of these really strong mid-ams, along with, guys like Stuart Hagestad and former champion Garrett Rank. I mean, you're one of these really strong mid-ams in this field. You know what this field's like. I mean, this is an absolutely incredible field. I'm going down the list of names. And like you said, I mean, when you go to these USAM qualifiers, you got to kind of put that out of your mind. But still, I mean, when you look at the field, has to be one of the strongest fields I've ever seen.
Absolutely. No question. First of all, you're very, very nice to put me in the same sentences as guys like Joe Duraney and Stu and Garrett. And I agree with you on the field. The field is outstanding. It's a testament to sort of the history of the championship and guys coming out and playing. And again, at the end of the day, I think there's so many good players. There's going to be certain players that are really playing well that week. There are going to be other guys that maybe aren't playing as well. But at the end of the day, it's what anybody else is doing is really sort of out of your control. And especially with Joe and Stu and Garrett, all great friends of mine, they're very open about their sort of competitive mindset when they get into these events. And I've talked to sort of all of them about it. And it's neat to hear, especially a guy like Garrett who won this tournament in 2019, guy like Stewart that obviously has carved out, a special place in the history of amateur golf for himself. And hearing, how they approach that has been really beneficial to me. That's just kind of sort of dipping my toe in the high end competitive atmosphere.
And I know you're not targeting any sort of a specific score or where you want to end up after stroke play, but as someone that undoubtedly can, finish in the top 10 of the Western Junior, you got to like your chances this week, right?
It's, I think there's enough.
I'm just setting you up, man. I talked to Gator Todd here, so I'm just.
Did you talk? He settled a bet for me with a bunch of Unwencia members. I don't know if he gave you the whole history there.
No.
About that. Dad, real quick. So all these guys at Unwencia said, "Well, how would you do in the Western Junior out here?" I said, "Finish in the top 10." And he said, "No way. You wouldn't finish in the top 10 against these kids." I said, "I watched Wednesday afternoon. I said I would 100% finish in the top 10. They said, "No chance." So I texted Gator, who was out there watching. I said, "Gator, where would I finish inside or outside top 10? I said, "Top 10, 100%. I said, "Thank you." I mean, these kids are very good players, but
Yeah. That's it is interesting, back to your earlier question, Ben, about the development of both our boys. And it's Charlie mentioned that he didn't feel he was a very good junior golfer in the state of Illinois, but golf changes. I mean, you go through periods of feeling like you can just control the golf ball at any moment and put the right swing on it, and you can make that golf ball. But then there are other times where you just and to see our boys develop really the love of the game and understanding that there are going to be days where you don't have your A game. There'll be days where you're just invincible, but learning to go through that and understand your kind of place in the game has been very, very interesting for us.
I can only imagine just seeing the journey with both of them, and also obviously a lot of the different tournaments and championships you played, and then the ups and the downs, and navigating your way into kind of the mid-am circuit and playing these great championships. You're absolutely right. It has to be just a fascinating journey that you both are on, as well as your brother. The one thing I wanted to ask you, Rick, before we kind of pivot to some of the interesting things that are done with this Western Amateur, is I know you taught classes at the Kellogg School at Northwestern, and I know that's where you got your MBA. A lot of these kids are going to be there kind of in game mode. They're really going to be focusing on playing the best of their ability at the Western Amateur. May or may not have a time to sit and chat with you even for a few minutes. But I know one of the things you taught in your classes was leadership. And a lot of these players in the field, they're students. They're heading back to college either for their first time getting onto their collegiate teams, but they're heading back as student athletes. They'll be looking to lead their teams, or they'll be looking for leadership from their fellow teammates. So I thought it'd be a good opportunity maybe to ask you, what are the key attributes of being a successful leader?
Well, you're nice to ask that, and I got that question a lot when I was the CEO at Northern Trust, and I have a number of principles about leadership. I won't go into all 10 or 11 of them, but I do think for golfers, you have to have for sure a sense of balance, and I think great leaders do not overinvest or underinvest to great degrees in their game, in their personal life, their social life, their academic life. You have to be balanced. Just as Charlie was saying, academics, we always felt as a family that academics were important, but sports and competition and teammates and teamwork were all very important as well. And so I've always thought that balance is important. And the way I always found to achieve balance was that priority. So that, look, I was the CEO of a very large global banking company, and everybody said, well, that's your most important priority is running Northern. And it really wasn't. It was, it was my faith and my family and my friends, and sort of Northern was actually fourth on my list.
What was fifth?
Golf. My golf game. So Charlie's heard that joke a little bit, but I understood that I spent a lot of time at Northern. I traveled around the world. It was 20,000 people and a public company. I got all that, but the most important things that I made sure that I didn't underinvest in or ignore, were my family and my friends. And so I think great leaders have a sense of balance, and I think for young players, they can get so focused on their golf game and so pinpoint accuracy and hit the perfect shot, and they've got people advising them around all these things, and that's fine if they can manage to be balanced in the other things that make life meaningful. And if they do that, I think they'll end up being great. They'll be great teammates. They'll be great college golf captains or leaders, and they'll get better in their game and in their social and educational lives.
Real quick, just building on that, Ben, because I've thought about this a lot, and obviously have Dad as sort of like hero and mentor, and grew up on those Northern Trust bedtime stories and whatnot. But it's been really fun for me now at 36 years old to be playing in these events with the college kids, and to be able to be reflective on my years playing college golf, and now being, working professional, where, I have this thesis that playing college golf is sort of the best job training you can get. Because, and most of these kids will turn professional and whatnot, and some will have great careers, but some will find themselves back, working, as a member of a team in a job. And if you think about what college golf really is, you are obviously an individual that is out there on the golf course performing, but you're also performing on behalf of, the other four guys that are in the lineup that week. And you're, at the end of the day, you're really being judged, on how your team does. Your performance is an element of it. But that's the real world. That is how teams within Northern Trust operate. You're part of a team. You're tasked with responsibilities. You're doing that, but you're being judged as how your overall unit of the business is, or team within a unit is doing. And that's what college golf is. And I just think it's such a cool parallel that really doesn't exist in other sports necessarily, or quote unquote team sports. And that's been just so fun for me to really think about, get to know these kids, and sort of occasionally opine on that.
That's two great points. Just everything you guys said is fantastic. I wish that more of the players, obviously, like I said, they're zoned in, but open their ears, open their eyes to see what's around them, and speak to as many people as possible, and learn how to become better leaders, better better team players. It's only going to benefit them further down the road. You're 100% right. Before I let you two go, there's just really great information you've shared, and I know you're both super excited about the Western Am. But the thing that I'm really excited about, that I think a lot of people that are going to be there live watching it, but also people around the country, around the world, is the live streaming portion of the 119th Western Amateur. It's something rarely ever seen at this level. But the Sweet 16 match play competition, obviously it's 72 holes of stroke play over 3 days. Then you go to the Sweet 16 of match play, and then obviously to a champion. But you're going to be providing more than 12 hours of live streaming coverage on the Friday and Saturday at the conclusion of the event. It's going to be on golfchannel.com. It's going to be on the westernamateur.com. It's going to be on Peacock streaming service, Golf Pass. I mean, it's going to be everywhere. And I guess, Rick, I'll pivot to you. It's one thing to recognize how important, or it's one thing to recognize that the technology is going to be available, that you can actually do something like this for a championship, but it's the other, it's a completely other thing to devote the time and the resources and the manpower to actually make this happen. How did this all come to pass, and how exciting is this for you and the entire team at the Western Golf Association?
Great question. And Mark Wilson is a little bit of the story here. He's actually out playing Glenview right now. It kind of gets back then to our wanting to showcase this, in a different light, both from the player's perspective, the financial dynamics I talked about, but to make this tournament, look and feel bigger than maybe it has in the past. So the WGA has been looking into live streaming for a number of years, and we wanted to be very supportive of it. I've got to give a shout out to my wife, Kate, who, little known fact, George Savaricas is from Wilmette, Illinois, and kind of childhood friends with Frederick and Charlie. And in one of our meetings said to the WGA, you should call George and see if he would do a piece, on Golf Channel, or, maybe there could be some broadcast. And so we've got Steve Scott and, Mark Wilson and George Savaricas are announcing the Sweet 16 players on Thursday night. And we've got the connection now with the Golf Channel and all the streaming that they're going to do on Friday and Saturday. And so we think it's just another step in the evolution of the Western Golf Association and the Western Amateur to get to that next level in terms of visibility and impact in amateur golf. And we're very, very proud of this new association that the WGA's got with the Golf Channel, and look forward to the streaming broadcast.
Listeners of this podcast know that Steve Scott and I played high school golf against each other in rival high schools in Coral Springs, Florida. I've gone on to create my own golf podcast, and all he's done is win a Western Amateur, go to 2 Walker Cups, and play professionally. So clearly, I have a little bit, I have one up on him. So, but it'll be fun to reconnect with him at the Western Amateur.
And I will toss in that Steve Scott and I and 2 Northern Trust clients won the Lurie Children's Memorial Pro-Am tournament at Unwencia Club back in, I think, 2001. When in the Luries, again, this is just another example of golf giving back to the community. The Luries Pro-Am is probably, I think it is the oldest Pro-Am it used to be part of the Western Open. And they've got this great trophy with Arnold Palmer's name on it, Jack Nicklaus, and Steve Scott and Rick Waddell and 2 of our clients' names are on it. And I had a great time with Steve. I don't know if you'll remember, I birdied 18 with a stroke, and we won by like 1 or 2.
How could he forget? I mean, I'm sure. How could he forget?
I was just looking through some old scorecards, and I saw my scorecards from that day. But Steve's a great guy. We enjoy playing with him, and we pestered him about his amateur defeat, unfortunately, to Tiger Woods out of Pumpkin Ridge. That was awesome.
You mentioned that to Steve all the time?
Well, we asked him what was going. he knew who he was up against, and he gave a great fight. He was happy to talk about it.
Oh yeah, yeah, that's one of the best USAM finals of all time. So
yeah, for sure.
96. Well, I'll let you both go, but I couldn't help but I wanted to definitely ask one final question, and I'm not sure if it's hit you yet, but I mean, Rick, you're the tournament chairman of the Western Am. It's at your home club, site of the very first Western Am. You know, that's so much to look forward to, and it's going to be a long week, but I know it's going to fly past. But then you have your son Charlie in the field, and he's the club champion. And I'm not a filmmaker, but I do know a couple, and this kind of sounds like movie material. How thrilling is this for you both? Has it kind of sunk in yet?
It has. I mean, we've been very busy with our tournament committee and getting everything organized and ready for 156 players to come in. And as Charlie said, they're all great players. And I think I know maybe a little bit about golf that, those that can chip and putt, and get the ball in the hole, typically are and be patient, as Charlie said. I think, as a parent, I'm always nervous. I want my kids to do well, and I've seen them, pull off great shots, and I've seen them, when things don't go well. I just want Charlie to play his game and be competitive. And the other thing is, if you get through the medal play, match play it's totally different. And I think getting to match play is probably Charlie's first goal. And then it's just playing, the opponent and playing the golf course in match play and taking it one shot at a time. So it would be a dream come true if he made it to the finals and in fact won it. But I think he's just thinking about the first goal is to get into match play, because that's the big one. But we'll see. Yeah, he's playing well. I can tell you, we just 600 today. You were playing great. He's his swing looks good, and he's putting well, which is also important.
Sounds easy, Charlie. Just go win the darn thing.
Very easy. Well, I obviously I am playing well, and you can't help but kind of think about that with Dad being the chair and whatnot. The thing, I have a 3-year-old son who thinks that like golf, and especially tournament golf, is just about the coolest thing ever. And he wears the USAM qualified medal. He's been wearing it for 10 straight days, every day, putting it on, which is so cool to see. And so for me, I want to play well. Everybody wants to play well, but representing the club and the membership is sort of goal number one, and putting up a good fight for all of them. But then also I'm excited, on the home turf to have my son Clark come out and be able to see me play. And that just to me is going to be very special.
He's going to be in the tournament chairman's cart.
Oh,
yeah.
Oh, well, that's a pretty good spot to watch a Western Amateur. I'd imagine he's going to get VIP access and plenty of juice boxes and animal crackers and just about anything this kid wants.
Spot on. He knows exactly where the halfway house is.
Exactly. That's awesome. Fantastic information. I think this will get everyone that's listening to this episode more excited than they have already been for the Western Amateur at Glenview. And Charlie, best of luck playing the course. Rick, best of luck staying calm and collected while you're watching him on the course and also being the tournament chair. But I appreciate you both having me to Glenview, and I appreciate you stopping by the back of the range.
Thanks, Ben. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you, Ben. Thanks for everything that you do for amateur golf and promoting it.
And there you have it. Special thanks to Rick and Charlie Waddell for joining me on this very special Western Amateur preview episode. Don't forget, follow along on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and follow WGA Championships on Instagram as well. Enjoy the week, enjoy the live streaming of the Western Amateur, and we'll see you next time here at the back of the range.